If you're looking for yet another mystery story filled with warmth and wisdom and, of course, just a touch of mystery, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I will be reviewing The Miracle of Speedy Motors by Alexander McCall Smith. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we're taking a look at the 9th book in the #1 Ladies Detective Agency. I tell you what, if you think you're going to be interested in this series, you're going to have to learn how to say that. It is a mouthful, and I've discovered that one of the biggest impediments I have to turning people onto this series is that they can't remember the name of it. I will tell you that's something worth practicing if you think that you're going to enjoy this series, and if you think you're going to find yourself talking about it, which I obviously am. Now, I really enjoy this series. Everyone knows that about me that watches this channel or follows anything about what I read. You know that I am going to finish this whole series this year. And I would say that these books really do build on themselves. You can't just pick one up. I think that they're not very episodic. They're not ones that you can just pick up like any old episode of Law and Order or, I don't know, CSI, whatever. You are fine with just having playing in the background during some kind of TV marathon. These books are not quite like that. I would say that a lot of the mysteries in them, especially the mysteries that don't deal directly with the main characters, those could be read independently, but that is really underselling the value of these books. The value of these books is, of course, the fact you are, of course, interested in the main character, Precious Mma Ramotswe, and her assistant, Grace. Those are the two main characters, although now you have Precious's husband, Mr. J.L.B. Matakone, and a few other characters that add a lot of color and fascination in this series. For that reason, I'm going to give a synopsis of this book and of all the books. And I give a few spoilers, although the mysteries themselves that are the detective cases that she takes on, I tend to not reveal those. I do like to give you guys something to enjoy, but I do think that the main things going on between the main characters and the world in which they interact are a big part of the series. And those are the types of things that I like to cover. In this book, The Miracle of Speedy Motors, it actually kicks off with an ominous twist. Grace, who is, of course, Precious's assistant, although eventually becomes an increasingly important member of the detective agency, who becomes a really good friend of Precious and is sometimes, very capable, but can be a little prickly. She is actually going to open an unassigned letter that contains a threatening message to the agency, which of course is going to raise the stakes. And so the #1 Ladies Detective Agency is going to have to take on the task of investigating who might be behind these unsettling messages. But of course, that is not all. You soon have another request from Mama Sabina, a woman with no known family who asked for help in finding her biological relatives. And having been adopted, she knows little about her background, and of course this, as you can imagine, it makes that an incredibly fraught mystery in and of itself, with the implications of trying to find one's family. And then of course on the personal front, Grace is facing a dilemma in her engagement with her fiancé, Phuti Radeputi, who is an incredibly nice, but also a character that can be a little unsure of himself at times. He has a bit of a stutter. Phuti had bought a gorgeous bed with a red velvet headboard that he was excited for them to have when they get married and move in together. And for one reason or another, Grace is forced to leave it out when it is delivered, and so it is going to get ruined in a rainstorm. And Grace is just struggling with a way to tell him about this, and it is also going to be something that I'd say adds a little bit of humor. Not that you're cheering for Grace and her uncomfortable situation, but I would say that you are certainly trying to encourage Grace to be a little more frank and a little more open in her relationship with Phuti Radeputi. This seems to be not just these two characters. I would say you even see it a little bit between Precious and Mr. J.L.B. Matakone, where there's just a reticence to fully share all of your thoughts and concerns with each other. But I would say at this moment, it's all the more poignant and all the more noticeable for Grace. But really, the biggest thing going on in this book, and one of the most challenging and both heartwarming and also really painful moments, is that Mr. J.L.B. Matakone, Precious's husband, is determined to try and help their adopted daughter, who is in a wheelchair, to get better. And so he's going to take their adopted daughter, Mothaleli, to South Africa, and they're going to go on a very expensive visit to see if she can be cured, to see what the possibilities or options are. And even though everyone is deeply skeptical, it is going to really raise concerns when Precious discovers just how expensive it is. and how much Mr. JLB Matakoni is willing to sacrifice just to give their adopted daughter this chance. I would say that's the most impactful element at the heart of this book and this story, and I think it really speaks to just how good these people are, how caring and how thoughtful they are, and how much they just really want to help people. Obviously, people that they feel any kind of commitment to, each other as well as their adopted children. And I will let you read to find out what exactly happens with that, because it's not just what happens in South Africa, it is also the choices that Precious makes so that that trip is possible. And I'd say that's probably the most important part of this book in terms of getting to the most poignant story. And I think that's enough of a summary. I think you do get a fair amount of cases that you might be interested in, but as usual, I think that the interaction and the emotional impact and relationships between everyone that you've come to love by this point is what's really important. And I will say that I'm really coming to appreciate Phuti Radaphuti. He goes on to play a much larger role in the series, and I think this is, of course, one of the books where you're starting to see more development of his character and, of course, his interaction, not just with Grace, but also with Precious and with other members of the team and the little community that you're following along here. As usual, who would I say this book is for? Well, it is a book that is pretty deep in a series at this point, and you do need to go back to the beginning, but if you think you would be interested in this series, I would highly recommend giving it a go. You may need to read a couple of the books to really start to appreciate the characters because of the structure of this series. But of course, if you think otherwise, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on this series as a whole, but specifically if you have thoughts on this book. One of the points of this channel is, of course, to engage more with what people are thinking, not just about books as a whole, but about individual books. And so I would love to know if anyone has any thoughts on this book, The Miracle at Speedy Motors in particular. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and until next time, keep those pages turning.